Jack Riker sat in the captain's chair of the stolen Zarkon dreadnought, watching the war nexus burn. The warhead had done its job. A supernova of destruction erupted in the void, engulfing the Zarkon's military command station in a tidal wave of energy and fire. Metal tore apart at the molecular level, energy fields collapsed, and the entire construct imploded into itself before exploding outward in a shockwave that shattered nearby warships. It was over. The Empire's central command was gone. Their vast fleet, millions of warships once linked by the Nexus AI, was now a scattered, leaderless mass. Jack leaned back, exhaling slowly. They wanted a hunt. Now they're the ones running. But it wasn't over. The Zarkon weren't just going to roll over and die. If they had even a sliver of command structure left, they'd be hunting him now. And they wouldn't stop. Jack's grip on the armrest tightened. He wasn't done yet. The Empire strikes back. The first enemy warships appeared on the edge of his sensor grid. Survivors of the destruction, the remnants of the Zarkon High Command. Jack counted 4 dreadnoughts, a dozen cruisers, and hundreds of fighters. Even with his stolen warship's firepower, he was badly outnumbered. But they didn't know one thing. Jack Riker didn't fight fair. His hands flew across the holographic controls, rerouting power from non-essential systems to weapons and shields. The Zarkon fleet hailed him. A hulking warrior appeared on the screen, a Zarkon warlord, clad in heavy obsidian armor. His mandibles twitched with fury. Human. You think yourself a god? Jack smirked. Nah. Just a guy who's really pissed off. The warlord bared his fangs. Your war ends here. Surrender, and your death will be swift. Jack flipped a switch. That's funny. I was about to say the same thing to you. Then, he fired everything. Final battle. The dreadnought unleashed hell. Titan-class plasma cannons roared, cutting through enemy ships like paper in a wildfire. Flak turrets shredded approaching fighters. The Zarkon fleet returned fire, their weapons hammering Jack's shields. Red warning lights flashed across his console as energy levels plummeted. He gritted his teeth. Not going down. Not here. Jack punched the thrusters to maximum. The dreadnought surged forward, weaving between enemy fire. The bulky warship *** shouldn't have been able to move like this, ***, but Jack made it dance like a predator. Missiles screamed through space. Explosions bloomed like dying stars. Jack targeted the nearest cruiser, unloading a full spread of torpedoes. The ship erupted, breaking apart. The shockwave ripped through the battlefield, knocking enemy fighters off course. Jack took the opening. He dived the dreadnought toward the largest warship, the warlord's flagship. The final kill. Boarding the beast. Jack couldn't just destroy the flagship. He needed to send a message. His warship crashed into the warlord's dreadnought, smashing through its docking bay like a battering ram. Alarm screamed. Zarkon warriors rushed to respond. Jack grabbed his weapons and stormed into the wreckage. They came at him like a wave. Jack met them with fire and steel. His plasma rifle roared, cutting through the first ranks. He switched to his blade as they closed the distance. One Zarkon lunged. Jack sidestepped, grabbed its wrist, and drove his knife into its gut. Another swung a massive war axe. Jack ducked, rolled forward, and severed the alien's leg. Bodies fell around him, but Jack never stopped moving. He pushed toward the bridge. Toward the warlord. One man versus the warlord. The bridge doors hissed open. The warlord was waiting, standing at the center of the massive war room, his crimson energy blade humming. You should not have come, human, he growled. Jack cracked his neck. You're the last one standing. Let's finish this. The warlord attacked first. He moved like a blur, his blade slicing through the air. Jack barely dodged, feeling the heat of the energy weapon singe his shoulder. The warlord was fast. Powerful. But Jack was faster. Smarter. Meaner. He faked left, then spun right, driving his blade into the warlord's ribs. The alien howled in fury and slammed Jack against the bulkhead. Pain exploded in Jack's chest, but he fought through it. He grabbed a plasma grenade from his belt and jammed it into the warlord's side. The alien's eyes widened. Jack grinned. Boom. He kicked the warlord back. The grenade detonated. The warlord vanished in a flash of white-hot fire, his body reduced to scattered ash and metal. The last stand. Jack stumbled back onto the bridge controls. His ship was falling apart. More enemy warships were coming. Too many. No way out. Jack exhaled. One last trick. He activated the dreadnought's core overload. The ship would go nuclear in less than 60 seconds. Jack limped toward the escape pod, sealing the launch bay doors behind him. The pod launched into space just as the dreadnought erupted. The explosion tore through the last of the Zarkon fleet, a wave of fire and destruction consuming everything. Jack watched from the viewport. Nothing was left. The Zarkon Empire was finished. The last survivor. The escape pod drifted through space, Jack staring at the endless void beyond. His body ached. His mission was complete. But there was nowhere left to go. Then, a blip on the radar. Jack turned. A ship. Not Zarkon. Something else. Human. A voice crackled over the comms. Survivor detected. Identifying. Holy hell. Jack Riker? Thought you were dead. Jack smirked, leaning back. Yeah, not today. The ship pulled him in. Jack closed his eyes. His war was over. The galaxy would remember his name. The hunter became the legend. Jack Riker, the man who killed an empire. Jack Riker sat in the pilot's chair of the captured Zarkon transport, staring at the fleet map he had stolen from the dead guards. His fingers traced the glowing projection of the Empire's war nexus, the heart of their military power, a massive orbital station that controlled entire fleets through an advanced AI network. Destroying it would cripple their entire war machine. His lips curled into a smirk. You wanted a hunt? Let's see how you handle the deadliest predator in the galaxy. Stealing a warship. The transport ship's controls were alien, but Jack was nothing if not adaptable. He tapped through the interface, testing its functions. The auto-navigation system was still engaged, its course leading toward the nearest Zarkon military outpost. Perfect. Jack modified the ship's beacon, disguising it as an authorized vessel. He wasn't walking into an enemy stronghold blind, he was infiltrating it. He pulled up a holographic inventory list from the ship's database. His eyes narrowed at the list of supplies in the cargo hold. Plasma explosives. High-frequency disruption charges. Anti-gravity field dampeners. Jack chuckled. They'd armed him without even knowing it. The ship lurched as it exited the jungle planet's atmosphere. Ahead, the stars stretched endlessly, but what dominated his view was a colossal space station orbiting a nearby moon. It was heavily fortified. Dozens of warships patrolled the perimeter, their sleek black hulls bristling with weapons. Defensive platforms hovered in synchronized formations. If Jack was going to take them down, he needed a bigger ship. Docking with the enemy. The transport's automated systems handled docking procedures. Jack stayed low, hiding in a storage crate, his breathing slow, controlled. The moment the doors hissed open, he sprang into action. Two guards stood outside the transport bay. Jack moved like a shadow. One quick slice across the first guard's throat, silent. The second turned, but Jack was already on him, snapping his neck in one brutal motion. He dragged their bodies into the shadows and stole one of their armor sets. The helmet's visor activated automatically, overlaying alien text and HUD elements in his vision. He was inside. Sabotage from within. Jack moved through the war station like a ghost, blending into the disciplined march of Zarkon warriors. He navigated his way toward the control deck, passing towering alien machinery, energy reactors humming with power. His first target? The shipyard command center. Inside the control room, alien officers worked at their stations, overseeing fleet deployments. Jack slipped past them and approached the central power console. He attached a disruption charge to the core terminal, setting a 90-second detonation delay. Then, he walked calmly out the door. Exactly 90 seconds later. Boom. A chain reaction erupted through the entire deck. Lights flickered, alarms blared, and the entire station lurched violently. Chaos erupted as officers shouted orders, trying to regain control. Jack used the confusion to descend deeper into the facility. Hijacking the flagship. Jack's true target wasn't just any warship. He wanted their flagship. The Dreadnought-class battleship docked at the core of the facility was the biggest vessel in the fleet. It was his ticket straight to the war nexus. Security was tight. Elite guards patrolled the hangar, their armor heavier, their weapons deadlier. But Jack had one advantage. They thought he was one of them. He walked with confidence, moving toward the flagship's ramp as if he belonged there. A squad of Zarkon enforcers moved past him without a second glance. Jack stepped onto the boarding platform and entered the massive warship. Taking the bridge. Inside, the corridors were lined with alien technology, glowing consoles displaying fleet movements and weapon systems. The bridge was up ahead. Jack picked his moment. The bridge doors hissed open. The crew, 5 high-ranking officers, turned, expecting a routine report. Instead, they got Jack Riker. He unleashed a storm of plasma fire. The first officer fell before he even reached for his weapon. The second dove for cover, too slow. Jack's blade buried deep into his skull. A third lunged at him, but Jack sidestepped, grabbed the alien's own sidearm, and put 2 shots through its chest. Seconds later, the bridge was his. Jack didn't waste time. He accessed the command console, overriding the ship's controls. Destination locked, the War Nexus. The massive warship detached from the docking station, engines roaring to life. Jack had just stolen the deadliest ship in the Empire. Unleashing hell. The alarm spread across the entire fleet. Warships mobilized, trying to intercept Jack's stolen battleship. But he was already in control. Jack activated the ship's heavy artillery and turned its weapons against the enemy fleet. Missile pods erupted, sending high-yield plasma torpedoes into the surrounding cruisers. Defensive turrets spun to life, unleashing a storm of energy bolts, shredding the Zarkon's own fleet. He wasn't running. He was annihilating them. Enemy fighters swarmed in, trying to breach the ship's shields. Jack maneuvered the massive warship like a fighter jet, weaving through their own formations. Explosions lit up the darkness of space as ships crumbled under their own firepower. Jack punched in the final coordinates. The War Nexus loomed ahead. A massive orbital fortress, lined with planet-cracking weapons and defense grids. A normal army would never have stood a chance. But Jack Riker wasn't an army. He was one man. And he was about to bring the entire Empire to its knees. Final strike. As the War Nexus came into view, Jack activated the last weapon in the flagship's arsenal. A planet-destroying warhead. One shot from this would obliterate the entire Nexus. The Zarkon's communications flashed across the screen. Desperate messages, threats, offers for surrender. Jack just grinned. You should have never hunted me. He pressed the button. A blinding light consumed the screen as the warhead launched. The War Nexus was doomed. Jack didn't wait to watch. He turned the ship toward the nearest wormhole. The moment the warhead struck, the entire Empire would crumble. They had started this war. But Jack Riker was finishing it. Jack Riker fell like a phantom from the trees, his body silent as a breath of wind. His makeshift knife was already in motion before his feet even touched the ground. The nearest Zarkon never saw it coming. Jack's blade sank into the soft joint between the alien's helmet and armor. He twisted hard, severing arteries he didn't even need to understand. Thick, dark blood sprayed across the jungle floor as the massive warrior collapsed without a sound. One down. The others reacted a second too late. Jack snatched the alien's energy rifle before its body even hit the ground. His reflexes honed by years of warfare, he swung the weapon up and fired before they could register what had happened. A brilliant white-hot bolt of energy slammed into the next hunter's chest. Armor melted. Flesh burned. The creature let out a guttural shriek and fell backward into the undergrowth, smoke rising from the blackened hole where its ribs used to be. 2 down. The remaining hunters finally snapped into action. They spread out, weapons raised, their predatory instincts kicking in. Jack didn't give them the chance to regroup. He dived into a roll, vanishing into the undergrowth, moving like a wraith. The Zarkon had the advantage in numbers and firepower, but Jack? Jack had the jungle. And it belonged to him now. Jungle warfare. The hunters barked orders in their guttural language, their voices cold and efficient. They fanned out in a perfect military formation, each covering their blind spots, each moving with predatory grace. Jack pressed his body against the damp earth, slowing his breathing. Observe. Calculate. Strike. He counted them. 4 left. He had 1 rifle, 1 blade, and an entire jungle to use. One of them stepped too close. Jack shot up from the undergrowth like a viper. He drove his knife deep into the hunter's thigh, severing tendons. The alien roared in agony, collapsing as Jack wrenched the blade free and slashed across its throat in one fluid motion. Dark blood splattered across his face, but he was already moving. Never stay in one place. Gunfire erupted. Energy blasts scorched the ground where he had just been standing. The jungle lit up with flashing white light as the remaining 3 hunters opened fire, but Jack was already a ghost in the trees. He vaulted over a fallen log, rolling into the dense foliage, circling them. He spotted his next target, a hunter crouched behind a boulder, scanning the area. Jack grabbed a loose stone and hurled it into the brush behind the alien. The moment it turned toward the sound, Jack struck. He lunged, wrapping an arm around the creature's thick neck, and drove the knife up into the base of its skull. The hunter stiffened, its body twitching violently before going limp. Jack let it slide to the ground. 3 left. The last 2 weren't fools. They abandoned the spread-out formation and moved back to back, covering all angles. Smart. But not smart enough. Jack picked up the fallen hunter's energy rifle and aimed for the weaker one. One quick pull of the trigger. A sizzling bolt of white-hot plasma ripped through the nearest alien skull, punching straight through its helmet. It dropped instantly. The final hunter, now alone, let out a furious roar. Instead of firing, it tore off its helmet and stared Jack down. Its eyes were slit-pupiled, burning with rage. It charged. Jack barely dodged as a massive, clawed fist swung toward his face. He felt the rush of air as the strike missed by inches. The alien moved like a tank but had the speed of a trained warrior. Jack pivoted, sliding under a second strike and driving his knife into the alien's exposed side. The blade pierced deep, but the bastard didn't fall. Instead, it grabbed Jack by the throat and hurled him against a tree with bone-rattling force. Pain exploded in his ribs. His vision blurred. The hunter loomed over him, its mandibles curling into something that resembled a grin. It raised its weapon, aimed directly at Jack's skull. Jack grinned through the blood in his teeth. Wrong move. He twisted just as the hunter pulled the trigger. The energy bolt missed him by half an inch, but hit something far worse. A hive of alien insects hanging from the tree above. The impact shattered the hive. A swarm of razor-winged creatures exploded from the broken nest, screeching in rage. The Zarkon barely had time to react before the insects descended on him. They tore into his exposed flesh, their tiny serrated jaws slicing deep. The alien warrior screamed, flailing as the swarm engulfed him. Jack didn't stay to watch. He picked up an extra rifle, wiped the blood from his face, and melted back into the jungle. The hunters were dead. But Jack wasn't done. The truth behind the hunt. Jack followed the trails left by the Zarkon's landing party, using their own methods against them. Their arrogance had left them sloppy. He moved fast, covering miles through the dense jungle. Eventually, he found it, a clearing where a transport ship had landed. 2 guards. Jack took them out before they could even react. Inside, he discovered something that made his blood run cold. A holographic map. But not just of this planet. Of an entire fleet. The Zarkon's homeworld loomed at the center of the display, and surrounding it was a massive orbital weapons station. Jack stared at the data streaming across the screens. The station was the heart of the Empire's war machine. A single AI-controlled system linked thousands of warships. A slow grin spread across Jack's face. Well, now we're talking. He wasn't just going to survive this hunt. He was going to use their own weapons against them. Jack downloaded the data, grabbed what supplies he could, and set his sights on his next target. The heart of the Empire itself. The hunted had become the hunter. And the Empire was about to feel his wrath. Jack Riker woke to the scent of damp earth and the distant hum of alien wildlife. His head pounded like a war drum, a dull throb pulsing behind his eyes. He forced them open, blinking rapidly as he adjusted to the dim, green-tinged light filtering through the towering canopy above. Where the hell am I? He tried to sit up, but his limbs felt sluggish, unresponsive. Drugs. His instincts told him he'd been sedated, and judging by the weakness in his muscles, he'd been out for hours. Maybe longer. Years of Navy SEAL training kicked in, pushing aside the confusion. Panic was a useless emotion. He needed information first. The last thing he remembered was his team's mission off the South Pacific. A mysterious, fast-moving object had crashed into the ocean, and intelligence suspected a new kind of stealth drone. They'd been dispatched for recon. It should have been a standard in-and-out operation. But then, darkness. He probed his neck, fingers brushing a tender spot. Injection point. Someone, or something, had taken him. Jack inhaled deeply, this time through his nose. The air was thick with humidity, laced with an odd, sickly sweet scent, like overripe fruit mixed with decay. His training had taught him to trust all his senses. Smell could tell you as much about a battlefield as sight or sound. This jungle was alive, dangerously alive. He pushed himself up slowly, scanning the area with sharp, disciplined eyes. Massive trees stretched toward the sky, their trunks twisted like gnarled fingers. Their bark pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat, and thick vines hung low, swaying despite the absence of wind. The undergrowth was dense, a mess of tangled roots and bioluminescent fungi that cast a ghostly glow across the ground. The only sounds came from the unseen creatures beyond the foliage, low growls, strange clicks, and the rustling of something large moving through the brush. Then he looked up. His breath caught. High above the treetops, massive black warships hovered silently. They were sleek, with angular hulls that looked like jagged obsidian blades against the sickly green sky. No visible propulsion systems. No sound. Just watching. Jack's stomach turned to stone. He wasn't here by accident. A sudden vibration filled the air, more felt than heard, like the deep bass of an explosion. A moment later, a voice boomed inside his skull, bypassing his ears completely. "Run, human. You have until sunrise." The words carried a cold amusement, dripping with malice. Then, laughter. Jack's fingers curled into fists. He wasn't a man who scared easily, but something about that voice, the sheer arrogance in it, made his blood run hot with fury. He didn't know who they were yet, but one thing was clear. They thought this was a game. A flickering light in his peripheral vision caught his attention. He turned and saw holographic projections materializing in midair, scattered throughout the jungle like hunting markers. Each one displayed gruesome scenes. A six-limbed reptilian warrior sprinting through dense vegetation, chased by unseen forces. It made it only a few meters before it was disintegrated by a blast from above. A human soldier, terrified and bleeding, begging into a communication device that never responded. Something massive crashed through the trees behind him. The footage cut before the kill. A grotesque pile of bones and skulls, stripped of flesh, stacked beneath a massive alien banner. The meaning was clear. Jack wasn't the first. But I'll be the last. The Zarkon Empire, the name surfaced in his mind as if implanted there, had been doing this for years, abducting the deadliest warriors from across the stars to be hunted for sport. A twisted rite of passage for their elite. They thought Earth was primitive, its warriors unworthy, its weapons outdated. So they had taken him. Jack exhaled slowly, steadying his heartbeat. They expected him to run. To panic. To die. His lips curled into a grin. You sons of bitches picked the wrong guy. Assess. Adapt. Kill. Jack went into combat mode. First, supplies. He patted himself down. They'd stripped him of his weapons, his armor, his gear. He was wearing only his combat pants, boots, and the black undershirt he always wore beneath his tack vest. His dog tags clinked softly against his chest. No weapons? Then I'll make my own. He crouched low, scanning the jungle floor for anything useful. A fallen branch, too brittle. A jagged piece of rock, too heavy. Then he spotted it, a chunk of metallic debris half buried in the mud. Jack pried it loose. It was a shard of some alien alloy, razor-sharp on one end. Probably wreckage from a previous contestant. He turned it over in his hands. The weight was good. The edge was even better. A knife. Crude, but it would do. Next, mobility. Running in the open was suicide. He needed high ground. He scanned the trees. Their thick, twisted branches extended far and wide. Perfect for traversal. Jack took a running start and leapt. His fingers caught hold of a low branch, and with the strength that had carried him through brutal Navy SEAL training, he hauled himself up. From his new vantage point, he studied his surroundings. Tracks in the mud. Not his. Something large had passed through here, something with clawed feet. A predator? Another captive? No way to know. What he did know was that the real hunt hadn't begun yet. The ships above remained motionless, their eerie silence adding to the growing sense of unease. They were watching. Waiting. Jack let out a slow breath and tightened his grip on the blade. Let them come. Welcome to hell, aliens. The jungle shifted. Something stirred in the darkness beyond the trees. A presence. Multiple. Then, movement. Shapes began emerging from the shadows. 7-foot-tall figures, clad in segmented armor, their reptilian faces hidden beneath sleek, skull-like helmets. They carried energy rifles with glowing barrels, the light illuminating the serrated blades attached beneath the barrels. Zarkon hunters. Jack remained perfectly still, his heartbeat slowing, controlled. He recognized military formations when he saw them. These weren't mindless killers, they were disciplined, efficient. But they weren't SEALs. The lead hunter stopped, tilting its head as if sniffing the air. It turned to the others and let out a low, guttural growl. Jack knew that sound. It was the universal language of overconfidence. They thought they'd already won. A mistake. Jack moved like a shadow, shifting his weight along the branch, positioning himself above the group. He tightened his grip on the makeshift knife, the cold metal pressing against his palm. His lips parted, just enough for a whisper to escape. You think I'm the prey? His muscles coiled. You just made the biggest mistake of your lives. And with that, he dropped. The hunt had just begun.